we're on. All right.
There you go.
All right. Well, hello again. For those of you who have been to these sessions, I just want to thank you. I have been looking so forward, and I'm going to get a little closer so they can see me on that video. I've really enjoyed being here. As I said this morning, I think today, Jim, I don't know if you know this or not, but today I looked through my Facebook feed, and you know how on Facebook, those of you who are social media people, you can go ahead and see what happened last year, your memories. They'll tell you what happened on this day and whatever. Well, 2 years ago today was my first time visiting St. Matthew's Episcopal School. And so those little pictures came up, and it was just nice to see those pictures. And Jim was so proud of showing me around Homa. He made me go in my habit, pose around downtown with a bunch of painted butterflies on the wall and things like that, and he had a blast. And then I remember one of the memories, we looked because, Brother Todd has, well, not as much as I did 2 years ago, but always have had a pretty substantial beard. And there's a couple of guys over on the wall, former rectors of St. Matthew's, who Father Jim thought I might compete with, so went over and took some pictures with those guys. And so, no, it's a good experience, and this is my, I think, 5th time with you in 2025. I was here earlier this year and preached, and then we've had these 4 sessions together. So thank you so much for your hospitality, Jim, for your friendship and your mentorship over the last several years. And for all y'all church ladies who are making me even fatter, thank you. All right. Well, as it is my tradition, I'd like to start with another joke. You ready for that one? Okay, so this is a little bit more self-deprecating. As you know, Brother Todd is a Dutchman. Grew up in the Dutch Reformed Church, so I'm going to pick on my own people here. And if anything, like Scottish people, Dutch people are known for what we call our frugalness, or for us being cheap. If you want to give somebody a compliment, call a Dutch person cheap. That's a compliment. So there's this barber in my hometown, and he had a very nice tradition of making sure to give free haircuts all the time. And a couple of weeks ago, there was a Roman Catholic priest that came to get his haircut. Easter was coming, and he wanted to look good for Mass, and so he went to the barber and said, "Stanley, I'd like you to give me the Easter cut." And Stanley gave him a beautiful haircut, looked really, really good, and at the end of the time together, the father said, "Stanley, thank you so much. How much do we owe you for the haircut?" And Stanley says, "Listen, you're a man of the cloth. It's Easter. You get the haircut for free today." And he was so happy, and thank you so much. And barber went back to the barber shop the next day, and there was this beautiful little rosewood rosary on his stoop of his place that said, "Thank you so much, Stanley, for the beautiful haircut. We'll remember you at Mass and remember your little barber shop. Please take this as payment for my haircut." And that same day we had a couple synagogues in our hometown, and the rabbi went in to get his haircut. He was getting ready also. It was one of those times where Easter and Passover, they all kind of come together, and he got his haircut, and after the haircut was finished, again, "Stanley, how much do I owe you for the haircut?" "You're a man of God. We do not charge y'all for haircuts." And he was so grateful, and he said, "Thank you so much. We'll remember you at Temple. We'll remember you during our prayers for the week and for the success of your little barbershop." And Stanley came back to his barbershop the next day, and on that little stoop, he found this little beautiful memento from the rabbi. "Thank you so much for the gift. Please accept this as payment." Well, that same day, a Dutch Reformed minister decided he was going to get a haircut. It was coming up, time to get it. It was getting a little long, like Brother Todd's is getting a little long. And he says, "Let me get a haircut." Got a beautiful haircut, and at the end, he said, "Stanley, how much do I owe you?" "Listen, Domini," he said, "you're a man of God. We do not charge y'all for haircuts. Thank you so much. You just remember us and the success of our little barbershop in the future. That'll be payment enough." And sure enough, he came back to his barbershop the next day, and what did Stanley find on his stoop? But 7 other Dutch Reformed ministers decided to come. Use that for whatever you want. All right, thank you. All right, so today I want to talk a little bit about, we've talked a lot about the past of the Episcopal Church. I want to talk today a little bit about the present and the future, and then I want to just, wrap up today just by asking all the questions that you still have that you haven't gotten an answer to yet. We'll do our best to field those questions and answers so that y'all are Episcopalian experts when you leave today, okay? So the Episcopal Church, as you probably know, like most churches today, with the exception of a few, is in decline, right? Our numbers are going down like so many mainline congregations. When I say mainline, I'm talking about traditional Protestant denominations like Episcopalians and Presbyterians and Methodists and that kind of thing. I was telling my church lady group here another joke about Presbyterians. You know what George H.W. Bush said about Presbyterians? Presbyterians are the snail on top of a turtle saying, "Wee!" Move slow, right? But the church is actually in a period of decline, significant decline as the population of our congregations gets a little bit older. There is certainly some trends that we see, maybe a rebound where younger people, people younger than me, younger than you, are finding the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church is growing most amongst people who are either finding it from a different kind of adjacent tradition, like the Roman Catholic Church, and also for people who have never been church before, brand new people. And what they tell us is that a lot of people are finding the Episcopal Church for two reasons, and these are really good reasons, and I think it's something that we should definitely be leaning into. First of all, people come to the Episcopal Church because they are accepted no matter what. That's good news, right? Whether you are gay or straight, or whether you are poor or more affluent, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you have all kinds of church experience or you're brand new to this whole thing, one of the things that I love about the Episcopal Church is we are unashamedly welcoming to everybody. Everybody can find a place here. I love the moniker that we often see outside of the Episcopal Church, and what is that? The Episcopal Church welcomes you, right? Welcomes everybody. So no matter where you are, the Episcopal Church welcomes you, and especially within groups of young people in different parts of the country that maybe have come from places where their church wasn't accepting of them for whatever reason, they are finding a place here. The other thing that I think is really interesting that trends are showing amongst areas of the church that are growing, and that is folks that are finding the Episcopal Church that are looking for some kind of alternative to, let's call it more progressive or more alternative styles of worship. The Episcopal Church has a beautiful liturgy, a liturgy that dates back to the earliest days of the church, and some of that old music, some of that ancient tradition, some of that idea of experiencing the transcendent is here. When I say the transcendent or the transcendentals, we think of those things that are, ultimately, as St. Thomas Aquinas would say, we look for the good and the true and the beautiful, right? One of the things why I think that, as many people give us a hard time sometimes is the Episcopal Church is always very much concerned about our space that we're worshiping in. It's beautiful, it's transcendent. We try very hard to make it so that when people actually come through the doors, they understand that this is a different space. It's not an empty box, it's not a warehouse, it's not some other type of place that just looks like an auditorium traditionally, but it is a sacred space. And by sacred, we mean a space that is set apart. It's not the same as every other space. You can go to any number of places and be with a number of people, and we are told that, when 2 or 3 are gathered in Jesus' name, he promises to what? Be there in the midst of us. But being able to engage the sacred in a space that has sacramental furniture placed in specific places for specific reasons, whether it's the tabernacle or the bishop's chair or the pulpit being high and elevated, all of these things are there for a reason, and all of this, what we sometimes call pew aerobics and liturgical choreography, are there for a reason. They all tell the story. And folks are telling us that one of the reasons that they love also the Episcopal Church is because it engages all of our senses, right? We smell, we touch, we taste, we hear, we see, we feel. And we are human beings that are whole human beings, not compartmentalized human beings. And so when worship touches all of those things, it really is something that younger people are being drawn to. And folks that are not young any longer, maybe more young at heart, but all of those people are telling us this is what they're drawn to. And finally, what we are told, and we talked about this a little bit before, that the reason why some areas of the Episcopal Church are growing is because it is tied to the ancient church, and that it is in fact an apostolic tradition that can reach all the way back to Peter. We talked about Peter and his primacy today when he was out there fishing and eating with God, with the Lord. I wouldn't go as far to say as that Peter is the first pope of the Episcopal Church, but we can trace our apostolic succession through all of the bishops, from Peter, from Christ, all the way to Shannon Duckworth. Right? One person touched the next person who touched the next person, which is why so many times in the Episcopal Church, the kind of quote used to be, not as popular anymore, but used to be, no bishop, no church. It has to have a bishop. It has to be something that is ruled by a bishop in an apostolic succession, back to back to back to back, all the way to Christ. And so that type of tradition, that type of connection to the ancient church is also what really, really helps us to be able to kind of gather in folks that are looking for some type of experience within the church. Now, it's not to say that other churches don't have legitimate and wonderful experiences, but this is something that is really important to us. It's important to our identity. As you may remember when we first started to talk, that word Episcopal really has a lot to do with this idea of being run by bishops. It's all about our polity, how we're run. Episcopal comes from that word episkopos in Greek, which means bishop or overseer. It's how we are governed by bishops, right? Different layers of bishops. We have, the bishop who is in charge of whose seat is still vacant, of the See of Canterbury, down to Sean Rowe, who's our new presiding bishop, and then to our diocesan bishop, Shannon Duckworth. We are run, and we are looking to be continuing to be run by faithful bishops into the next several years. So that's what's going on with our church. Some of the things or the reasons why we're facing some other types of decline is frankly because it's a human institution, and the Episcopal Church is not immune, just like other traditions are, to schisms and to breakaways and things like that. We've had, in my lifetime, different types of people breaking off from the Episcopal Church into other types of Anglican traditions over things like the ordination of women, over same-sex unions, over all kinds of things, and that's okay. We want people to actually find the place that actually works for them the best, and yet there also seems to be a movement recently, I think of the Diocese of West Texas, for instance, where some of those people broke away, now all of a sudden are deciding they want to come back, right? They want to be together. They want to be with that ancient tradition that has perhaps been in their family for generations. And of course, the other reality that we face now in the Episcopal Church, as much as in the entire Anglican Communion, is that, I think I shared with you, maybe you'll remember this, the largest groups of the Anglican Communion, the largest churches in the Anglican Communion are what we call in the global south, right? Particularly in places like Africa. The biggest Anglican church in the world is in the Diocese of Uganda, right? That's where the Anglican Communion is really, really large. It's also where they are probably the most conservative, right? And so the Anglican Communion is kind of held together with, my grandma would say, Scotch tape and dental floss. It's just barely holding together, right? But we are trying more and more to focus on what unites us as opposed to what makes us different, right? I always say to everybody, whether you're a Catholic or a Methodist or some other type of tradition, if you can say the Nicene Creed and not cross your fingers, I'm your brother. I'm your sister. I'm your sibling, right, in Christ. Those things are really, really important. Just like we talked about in the sermon today, it's all about the resurrection. That's important. If you don't believe in the resurrection, I don't know what to tell you. That's kind of a central tenet of Christianity and one of those things that we must never release. Again, as I said this morning, not just a metaphor, but a reality in our lives. So that's kind of the down and dirty of kind of where we are as far as growth goes and as far as challenge goes, which is why Michael Curry, our former presiding bishop, had laid out 3 things that he wanted us to be able to be focused on as Episcopalians during his episcopate. I don't think Sean Rowe has changed these yet, but I imagine he will. I always give Father Jim a little bit of a hard time because I always call him a company man, right? So because he's very good at kind of like, all right, this is what's coming out from the top. This is what I'm going to tell you then. And one of the things that 3 of the things that Michael Curry said about the Episcopal Church in our generation, I wonder if you know these. He called them the 3 legs of the Episcopal stool in our day. We need to be known for these 3 things. Do you know one of them? What are we supposed to be known for as Episcopalians today? Isn't that nice? No. We talk about the way of love all the time, Kodiak, but that's not one of the things he had talked about as far as these 3 stools, or 3 legs of the stool. But you're right. I mean, I don't mean to give you a hard time, but absolutely. We better be known by love. That's what Jesus says, right? You'll know they are Christians by what? How they love one another. Or when Jesus met Lazarus dead at his tomb, and he started to weep, and what did he say? See how much he loved him, right? So the 3 things, number 1, I'll give you a little hint here, has to do with creation care, right? We want to be known as the church who cares about conservation, about creation of this fragile earth, our island home, as our liturgy says, right? That we understand that this is a gift that we have been given and entrusted with this beautiful earth that we have. I looked outside today as I was coming in, and I got a little bit misty on the way to home because I was like, man, God, thank you. Look at this place. Look at this place. We can get lost in just the magnificence and wonder of creation, and we've got to make sure that we are taking care of this good earth that God has given us. That's very, very important, and that's something that is a marker of what it means to be an Episcopalian in the 21st century. The second one is racial reconciliation. Michael Curry set out that we want to be known as the church that is bringing people from all corners of the earth into one united mystical family in the body of our Lord, right? So whether you are from Asia or Africa, from North America or southern Louisiana, you belong, right? We are all together in this. We are one human family, and as we say all the time in our baptismal covenant, that one of the things that marks us as faithful Episcopalians is that we recognize the dignity and worth of every human being, right? That is something that our church is known for. And then the last one, which is the one that I'm most passionate about, and the one that Episcopalians are traditionally not as much about, is... What was that? Unity is a good answer, survey says. But good, thanks for playing. So there's another one though. It actually starts with an E. It sometimes can seem like a curse word in the Episcopal Church. Evangelism. Yes. Telling everybody else about Jesus in whatever you do, in whatever station of life that you're in. That doesn't mean that you're standing on a soapbox with a bullhorn out in front of Costco telling people they're going to die if they don't repent. What it does mean, though, in our life, in our speech, in our conduct, in the things that we do, that we are reflecting the goodness of God in the world, and that causes other people to wonder, and they look at you, and they hear you, and they see how you are living, and that excites them, and they ask questions, and then we have opportunities to share with them the reason why. I've heard Hilda's story a million times about how she cannot dislike anybody, right? She told it again today. This is something that is a wonderful tool for evangelism in all of us, that we treat our neighbors well, that we do well for each other. One of the things that I absolutely love, the first time that I experienced a real hurricane here in New Orleans, was after Ida. As a matter of fact, it was Father Jim and a number of us, we all took refuge at the Solomon Center together when we did that. But when I got home, the first thing that had happened is that my neighbors, while I was gone, cleaned up my yard. I didn't ask them to do that. They just showed up, right? And I thought to myself, what is going on? And each and every one of those people said, we're your neighbor, but the motivation for each of them doing that was out of love that they had received from God that they wanted to dispatch to me. And I was so moved by that. Something about this part of the world where we really are able to kind of come together in crisis and that kind of thing is a really beautiful reflection of some of the things that I'm trying to share with you today. So that is kind of what I wanted to talk about as far as where the church is today, the reality of where we are, where we're going. But it really is going to depend so much on us with that evangelism thing. If you want to see the Episcopal Church around for your grandkids and your great-grandkids and others, you have to evangelize. You have to let people know, right? About Jesus, about the way of love, and about this branch in particular of the Jesus movement, as Michael Curry would say, right? I hear a lot of times when I'm around churches, and I hear big churches, small churches, that we're so concerned, membership is in decline, all of our old people are dying, that kind of thing. What's the answer? You get new people, right? You get new people, and you have to be willing to go out and actually spread the gospel. When we talk about the Great Commission, this is not the Great Suggestion or the Great I Want, but it is a command of our Lord to go out and baptize and call people into relationship with Christ. Call people into relationship with the community of Christ, the church, right? Bring friends to church. The fastest way in which we can actually get people back into the church statistically is not because Father Jim is out there doing the good work and asking people to come to church. It's when us, the lay people, invite friends to church, right? And so I would say to you that if you really want to live into being what it is to be an Episcopalian, be a person who cares about the earth as God has given it to us. Be a person who is much concerned about reconciling everything, the whole world, to God's self, especially when it comes to reconciling each other. And then also letting people know about the good news of Jesus Christ, that resurrection is real, and that death is not the end, and that there is a place that is open and welcome and available for us here. And then when people come to church, my darling people of St. Matthew's, the radical welcome that you give them is so important. I was talking to the Altar Guild, the servers today before Mass started. And again, I'm just picking on Jim today again, but I always think about Jim when I walk into a church, and I get really anxious because it's getting close to 10 o'clock, and this one thinks it's the State of the Union address, and he's shaking everybody's hand down the aisle before we start. But what a difference! What a difference that is. What would it look like if every one of you, when you see a new face that comes into St. Matt's, that you also go up there and say, hey, welcome. Have you hung out with Episcopalians before? Is there anything that I can do? One of the things that was most helpful for me when I first became an Episcopalian, John David Van Doren, good Dutchman, not a lot of us in the Episcopal Church, but he actually met me at the door and he said, have you ever hung out with Episcopalians before? And I said, no, this is my first time. And he had somebody he grabbed and said, hey, Sue, this is Todd's first time in the Episcopal Church. Sue's going to sit with you and kind of guide you through the service so you're not lost. Because of the pew aerobics and liturgical choreography that we have to do, sometimes it can be intimidating for people, right? But looking for opportunities to be in the world as a member of Christ, be in the world as a person who is sold out to the Episcopal Church, that's the way we can evangelize too. I'll tell you two other things, then I'm going to open it up to some questions that people have told me how they got excited about the Episcopal Church. First of all, my Episcopal Church bumper sticker. We all have those, right? Or we can, right? But people will ask you about that. What does that mean? And then the other thing, this is not something I expect you to do, when we used to live on Audubon Street, not Audubon Boulevard, the poor ones where we live, we would sit out on the porch, and I had an old Thurible from Chicago that I brought with us, and I just sat out on the porch and had my tea and my paper, and I lit the charcoal, and I lit the incense, and the whole block started to smell like church, and people would walk by with their dogs and say, what is that? What are you doing? And I said, well, I'm praying. I'm an Episcopalian. We like the bells and the smells, and this is how I do it. And where do you go? And we told them where we would go. At the time, we were going to St. Anna's in the Tremé, which is what we sometimes call grandmas, right? There's two Annas in the Bible. Did I tell you about this? There's Anna, which is Simeon's pal at the temple when Jesus first came. And then there's also Mary's mother, who's traditionally named Anna. So if you ever go to St. Anna's in the Tremé and people say, welcome to grandmas, You'll know why. It's a very incarnational way of looking at church, that Mary had a mother and Jesus had a grandma. We don't think about that, but he certainly did. So welcome to grandmas, and they have all the incense and all the what my husband Tim calls sloppy Anglo-Catholic traditions, where they got all the lace and all of the stuff, and they're not sure why, but it's great. So all of that stuff is certainly some things that have colored my own attraction to the Episcopal Church, and we talked about this today in the sermon too. The thing that makes us different, especially in more Protestant-leaning circles, is our dependence and our reverence toward the Blessed Sacrament. It's a big deal, y'all. It's a big deal. We believe that Jesus is somehow mystically present in the sacrament. I remember one of those first times again that I went to Mass at Church of the Atonement in Chicago, and the elevation was happening, and the bells were ringing, and the incense was going, and not only just the incense and the bells on the chancel, but also they had all kinds of bells that Quasimodo and his gang were ringing in the back of the church. And as all of this stuff was happening, and as the bread was being placed on my tongue, and as the bells were ringing and the incense was going, I looked over to my friend that was there with me, and I said, I don't know what's happening, but I know what's happening. That mystery of our faith, that mystery of our tradition, where we don't have to have everything figured out, but we still are able to kind of lean into what's going on, is also something that I absolutely love. And then the fact that we embrace this idea of the Via Media, the middle way. Again, the question is, when somebody asks you, oh, Episcopalians, you Protestant or Catholic? The answer is yes. Yes, we are. Catholic treasures and Protestant truths are here. So all of that's kind of my own perspective, and then when you get really crazy, you end up being a friar in this, denomination, in this tradition, and we sell ourselves out. I mean, this is serious for us, right? Not to say that if you're not called to be a priest or religious, you're not serious, but it is so much part of my identity. This is who I am. That when I'm not wearing this, I feel like I'm naked. Right? I feel like this is, what is going on? I feel like a fraud when I'm not doing this, right? This is who I am. And it's my goal as a Dominican friar to be one of those people who continue to study and contemplate and then share the fruits of that contemplation in preaching and in spiritual direction and in teaching and in all manner of other ways in which God has called me to do my own work. So, what questions do you have at this point about the Episcopal Church, about the broader Anglican communion, or how it's all connected to the universal church? What are you still wondering about?
I don't. It's not a question, but one of the secondary reasons why I left my non-denominational churches was they didn't regularly do communion.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, again, from one of our younger people here, you know what I mean? That's a big deal. It is a huge deal. That sacramental witness. Again, the sacraments are present, I believe, in other types of mainline denominations, but none so rich as our own. Not every church has communion every week. Sometimes we do morning prayer, especially on the East Coast for some time. That was the principal service of the Episcopal Church, was morning prayer. But the sacraments are means of grace to us. Right? They're outward physical signs of an inward spiritual grace, and that's something that we have to offer. The church can offer all kinds of things. The church can offer into the world food programs and education and help for refugees and all these kind of things. But the thing that we really have to remember is that the thing that we actually have that nobody else has, that we do the best, that we are given by the Lord to do, is the sacraments. Right? That's what we do that nobody else does. And so I think a lot of the churches also that are growing a lot are leaning into their sacramental ministry. That's what they do. Right? That's what people are hungry for. We can give them all kinds of things that we think that they need, but really what we need to give them is the ability, as we said in our sermon today, as the pericope told us, Jesus said we're supposed to go out there if we love him and feed the sheep. Feed the lambs, take care of them. Give them the sacrament. That's our spiritual food. That's what the world hungers for.
I have a question.
Yeah. like Oprah here.
Just in the United States, where is, I guess, more Episcopalians? The East Coast, West Coast?
It's a great question, and it's because we are a big tent, the answer is all over the place, but there are different types of Episcopalians in different parts of the world. If you go to the East Coast, if you go to Virginia, for instance, if you called an Episcopal priest Father Jim, they'd probably laugh their head off, right? In that part of the world, you'd be called Mr. Morrison, right? Not Father Jim. You know, we in the South, in the Midwest, and where I come from, we sometimes call the Beretta Belt. It's more father and mother and that kind of thing, and it's more of a high church experience in the Midwest, right? It's very Catholic looking, right? Here in the South, similarly, because there was a time here that you could be arrested for not being a Catholic, right? So a lot of us have actually kind of grown up in that tradition, and it's stayed with us, and a lot of folks who have had difficulty with Catholic positions in one way or another will come to the Episcopal Church because it maybe aligns more with what they're feeling. In the West Coast, there's a huge group of Episcopalians that are in California, but you'll notice it's an Episcopal church because they follow the Book of Common Prayer, but they do things that we would never think of doing here in southern Louisiana. So the cool thing I think about the Episcopal Church is that it is a big tent, right? It's always been not about the doctrine and the theology that unites us, again, but it's about the fact that we pray together. It's that Book of Common Prayer that unites us in our prayer life. But as far as, kind of where are the most Episcopalians in the United States, they are where they started, on the East Coast, right? Yeah. Generations and generations of Episcopalians, a little bit more low or broad church, but certainly that's where the concentration is.
And I think it's also if you think about where the English settlers landed, and so this was more of a French area. But if you look at a lot of the Episcopal churches here, it came with a lot of the planters and stuff, folks that were coming from Virginia, people that came down to Mississippi, people that came down here, and the families that were rooted here. They were very, in this area, and especially St. Matthew's, it was a church that was always proud to be different than Catholic. And it was, if you look at our church history, it was pretty much a low church in its beginning days. And now, like many of the Episcopal churches, it tends to be becoming more mixed into the Catholicism, Catholic ways, which were that was always part since they had the time when they reclaimed the early parts of the church and through the Oxford movement, and that was in the early 1800s, I believe. And then and so it's interesting that when you look at it and see and in our diocese, the churches are very different. Around New Orleans and this section, a lot more Catholic. But if you get more up around New Roads and you get up more in different places, and it becomes a little bit more simpler. Even Thibodeau's, the church in Thibodeau is so much more simpler than the church here. Mm-hmm. And you'll see the difference. Morgan City is very different than here. So it's a church that blends. My personal belief is that the church tends to grow when especially in this area, when you don't try to make it so distinct as we're separate, but you try to look and say, how can we bring all the traditions together? So what we want to be able to say is, we want our Catholic brothers and sisters to come in, celebrate that, and we have room in here, and we'll make that room for you. And the same is true for our Baptist brothers and sisters who come in. Bring that in. We feel that with Doug coming in, and now Doug's leading a Bible study that has a great number of people finding life there. And so what happens is it's being able to unite and integrate the things. And it seems funny in a way, like you'll see I just put the statue of Mary in church up recently. I had a wedding here. And they wanted to put a flower at the Mary statue like the Catholic traditions do. And so I put it in church. I said, we really need that in church. And my feeling is, it's for Episcopalians, we honor Mary. It's a part of our core belief is that we honor Mary. And so, but for someone coming in from the Catholic Church, when you come into a church and you don't see a statue of Mary, or you don't see Jesus, a crucifix anywhere in the church, you wonder if it counts, in a way. I'll maybe be funny, but it's not a welcome mat, It doesn't help people to be able to connect, and we have room for that in our church to be able to bring in all those traditions. In Berwick, when you're it's interesting. The Methodists did a much better job being missionaries than the Episcopal Church did. And so, the Methodists really are spread kind of equally all across America, if you look. And we have, if you look at our denomination, you can see there's gaps, bigger gaps. I see it when they list openings in the Episcopal Church, that there's certain states that very rarely are looking for priests because they just don't have a bunch of priests in that section. So it's interesting when you look at across the United States that I see the Episcopalians strong in the East Coast, strong in the South here, and in Texas, and then the West Coast very strong. And so, it gets spotty at a lot of places in the United States where it's not as many. So it's interesting to see. I'll look and see if I can figure out the numbers and get that to you and let you know.
It's also historically been, and this is exactly kind of
Piggybacks on what Father Jim was saying, the Episcopal Church is always going to be larger in places where the center of population is larger, right? In the bigger cities, etc. Absolutely. Other questions or comments? I'd also love to hear why you're an Episcopalian.
My question is more of a history of the church, and I don't know if you can delve into it in the 4 or 5 minutes you want to do it, but from somebody who came from the Catholic Church over to putting his toe in the water, I guess, with the Episcopal Church, the Common Book of Prayer. How is it that developed, and as you went from the Church of England to the Episcopal Church, what's the 5-minute version or whatever, the short version of that? Because that's something that's always hit me as I'm sitting in Mass listening to the things going through.
you missed session 2.
I did. I missed all 3.
That's a lot in 5 minutes. Yeah, you're right. So the Book of Common Prayer was established at a time where there was a lot of fighting back and forth depending on which monarch was in power. We can be Catholic, we can be Protestant. We're Catholic, we can be Protestant, right? And everybody's doing things differently. And under, amongst other people, Queen Elizabeth I, right, Henry VIII's daughter, we established this idea that it's not common in as much as this low brow. It's common. This is what we all do, right? We all say the same things. There was a need for unity within Great Britain or England at the time, and there was a need for all of us to kind of come around and say the same things. And so the Book of Common Prayer allowed us to do that. As far as coming over from England, again, how the Episcopal Church came over here really quickly. We mentioned again about 20% of U.S. presidents, especially the earliest ones, were from the Church of England or Episcopalian. So that certainly is part of the legacy because we were back in the 15 and 1600s populated by a lot of people coming over from Britain, right? But during the time of the American Revolution, the clergy here in the church in the United States no longer wanted to swear an oath to the king. Right? And so we said, how can we still maintain that Anglican identity without actually being subjects of the king? And so in order to continue that apostolic succession, we started to get our bishops ordained by the Church of Scotland, or the Episcopal Church in Scotland, right? So people oftentimes ask me, are you Anglican or Episcopalian? The answer is yes, right? Part of the Anglican Communion, part of that federation of 136 national and local churches, but with a distinctly American ethos, right? So during the time of the American Revolution, one of the places that is so close to that time, if you want to go to the North End in Boston, you go to the Old North Church. which is actually called Christ Episcopal Church, where the ride of Paul Revere and that kind of thing happened. Again, it's an Episcopal church. Here in the United States, the National Cathedral is an Episcopal church. The Church of the President, St. John in Lafayette Square, that's an Episcopal church, right? So it's very much connected, especially to the earliest days of the United States, but certainly has a lot to do with that connection to the church in England. And still, I think why in American culture we're all very still connected to all things English, right? We all, I mean, how many royalists are here? I mean, how many of you love to watch and hear about the royal family? I still do, right? Y'all watch that. Yeah, I know you watch the wedding when it happened. I know you watch the coronation, right? We still feel connected to those things, right? Because it's part of our tradition, not only as an American, but also as an Anglican. Yeah? Great question. I don't know if that was even 5 minutes or if I answered your question, but if I didn't, just nod anyways. Jim.
Yeah, just another aspect of that. I think one of the things too, Chuck, for that is that, so when the printing press was, it came at the time our church was founded during the Reformation. So people had a hunger to be able to read and participate. And before that, they leaned heavily on the clergy or on the monks in the monasteries to do the praying for them. And so the people were mostly illiterate, and they would, so the monks would gather in the monasteries, they would copy the manuscripts, and they would sing the psalms and say the prayers. And then people kind of, although they were encouraged to take part in that, it was kind of like, well, the monks and the priests, they're the holy ones. The rest of us, we trying, you know. The Reformation, one of the big things was to say, no, you have to take ownership for your faith. You have to have your own, you got to hold to your own faith, and you got to do your own prayers, especially on the thing of buying indulgences or buying prayers or having masses said for someone or things like that. So after the dissolution of the monasteries in England especially, so on the continent, especially the Roman Catholics and Luther were fighting back and forth with big dogmas and big teachings, and they were fighting, trying to, out excommunicate each other and all these papal bulls and all these different teachings. Well, the Episcopal Church never really, it was busy flip-flopping with the different minorities, Catholic, Protestant. And so, but one of the things that they wanted to do was to encourage the people to pray. And so they wanted to take away all the mystery that the priests are somehow the Holy One. So the priest, what the Book of Common Prayer does is it puts everything you need. Okay, you got the Bible, and then you got the Book of Common Prayer. So here's morning and evening prayer, noonday prayer. That's a big part of the section. And here's all the sacraments: baptism, all the way through the confirmation, reconciliation, Eucharist, marriage, ordination of a priest, deacon, and a bishop, all in that same Book of Common Prayer. You look it all up. There's no secret manual. The sacrament of the sick. And all of it was in there so that it was like trying to take away the emphasis that there was some kind of magical formula. Here's the common prayer. This is what we need. And you can do this at home. If you only have a priest at the church, you all get together and do it. But so it was the sense that you didn't have other people doing the prayers for you. And so that's where, and the Episcopal Church was the first church to have that. And where the continent would have said, the reformers on the continent would have been, hey, the Bible. And you just get that Bible, and that's all you need. And in the Episcopal Church, it's the Bible and the sacraments. So you need, it goes hand in hand. So that's why it was so important. And boy, let me tell you, Episcopalians love the Book of Common Prayer. And a lot of people, some priests would say, we don't use it enough because you got to pick up that book and you got to use the book. And I find it's hard for newcomers because it's very hard to follow if you're not used to it.
Yeah, the way it's organized is the organized edition of the Book of Common Prayer is meant to be simple, but if you've never picked it up before, it's quite a reference to be able to look back and forth and where are we now. And but I love that, Jim. You're right. I mean, everything that you need to participate in Episcopal service at home or at church is right there. If you don't have a Book of Common Prayer, you should take one. I bet you we have extras here that you can take and actually be part of the church at home and family worship and personal devotions. That's a huge deal to us. Absolutely right. Yeah. What else?
One more,
Yeah.
sort of a non-essential one, but why are the northeast of the Episcopal Church
Doors red.
Yeah, so it's not just the Northeast, but you're right. The idea of the Episcopal Church's doors being red goes all the way back to Passover, right? It's the idea that you enter into the church through the blood of the Lamb, right? That's why they're red. And there's other churches that actually have that tradition as well. I know a lot of Methodist churches have a red door, but a lot of Episcopal churches have a red door, again, in the same way that the baptismal font is sometimes right at the back of the church as you're entering in. Everything in the Episcopal Church is a thing for a reason. Everything has a reason, but yeah, it has to do with the looking back over to Passover and entering into the holiness of God through the blood of Christ. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Part two to that
Okay, here you
was I've been to a lot of different places, and I have seen red doors for every single Episcopal church except this one. So why don't we have one?
Remember the best one came to mind? Yeah. It still counts if it's not red. But it's a good question, right? It's a good question. I also want to, in speaking of the Methodist Church, one of the things that is exciting about what's happening in the life of the Episcopal Church is we are in discussions with our brothers and sisters in the Methodist Church to become in full communion with them, right? So remember the Episcopal Church, this branch of this province of the Anglican Communion, we are in communion with other churches that we recognize their sacraments, their ordination. One of the ones that's probably closest to us is the Evangelical Lutheran Church, right? We're in full communion with them. We're in communion with a group called the Old Catholics, which for me, being a Dutchman, is very important. That's the Diocese of Utrecht in the Netherlands, right? We're also in full communion with the Moravian Church, which is the kind of historic Protestant church in the Czech Republic and the surrounding area. So we're also here in the United States and internationally talking about what it might look like for us to be in communion with the Methodist Church. What might that look like as we continue to lean into Jesus' high priestly prayer that they all may be one, right? So I like what Father Jim said about, if you are looking for a place where you can belong, this is one of them. I think it was famously Robin Williams, who was an Episcopalian, who said, in the Episcopal Church, you don't have to worry if you think that, you believe in something that nobody else does, because there's probably somebody else as well that believes that within the Episcopal Church, right? A lot of famous Episcopalians, if you've ever want to do some reading about a contemporary perspective of Episcopalians, another person that I absolutely love, though he's not as popular as he used to be, Prairie Home companion host Garrison Keillor, a famous Episcopalian, has all kinds of awesome things to say about our tradition, and got a couple poems about the Episcopal Church that really hit home to me as well. Why are you an Episcopalian? And this may be helpful for some who are actually, like I said, dipping our toe or thinking about it. For those of you who have been an Episcopalian for a minute, this is going to feel like testimony time, but I wonder, what is it that has brought you here and what has kept you here? Anybody? Yeah.
I was more recently confirmed into the Episcopal Church 2 or 3 weeks ago. One of the main reasons my main reason is I want to make the Christian church as great as it can possibly be, and I believe it's extremely important for us to be in full communion with all of the big mainline churches, including the Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, Lutherans, Presbyterian, and I thoroughly studied each one and just try to come up with a plan. So if I go side with this church, what would the steps need to happen in order to accomplish that goal? And the most self-evident, or the one that had the best chance in my mind, was the Episcopal Church. Because it seems to be by far the most eclectic and ecumenical out of all of the churches. And one thing I really liked is the kind of it feels like when I was in other churches, you couldn't cheer for other denominations whenever they would do something right. They would almost go oh, you're one of them. It's I go to church here every single day. I could never cheer for someone. But yeah, here it's just it does seem like you can cheer for other ones, and and it's also very friendly. It's kind of like there's a feeling of like let's just be family again. So
Beautiful, thank you, man.
Well, I want to comment on that too.
Yeah,
It's
all right,
like
here I
we
come, here I
had-
come, here I come. Good, thank you.
Yeah.
With him saying that, like, they had a National Day of Fair going on at the courthouse this week. And I was kind of leery, like, do I go? Because as a Catholic, it's like, no, you would never go do that. But as an Episcopal, I feel like, yes, I can go. I can go and listen to other churches preach and pray. Like, there was nothing wrong with that. And I really felt comfortable doing it that day. But like I'm saying, like, as a Catholic, it would have been like, no, you can't go do that. You can't step outside your faith of doing that. Whereas here, I felt comfortable. I'm like, yes, I can go do that. I can go pray with other people, even if they're not an Episcopal or whoever they were, So anyway.
Beautiful, thank you. Thank you.
Why are you an Episcopalian? No.
Okay.
Is that Mike?
Okay, so, wasn't sure I would be accepted at the church if I was to be out and as who I was, as a bisexual person, and so I heard that this church had changed before that these bisexuals and all these LGBTQ people can be accepted in the church. So I found out that this one was very close, so I tried this out, liked it, and felt welcome.
Excellent. Anything else? Is that it?
I forgot my question.
Well, it's a lot.
You said a mouthful, right? So, boy, the fact that we accept everybody, that we have you come in no matter where you are, that's good news.
yeah, you're stuck with that. Or you can defer to the gentle lady.
Lincoln, we have embraced you since you joined our church, and we've watched you grow and come so far because he was so shy. And now, he comes in and we embrace it. What can I do? And he, I'm so proud. I feel like a mama. Mama duck. So, and his sister now comes with him, and we just embrace.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Beautiful.
Okay, I'm an Episcopalian because I married one. And I look around the room and there's some cradle Episcopalians here. But I moved here from Freeport and I was kind of the great unchurched. And my mother-in-law was big in this church. My husband not so much, but nor is he today. But at any rate, there was a time in my life that I needed something. And so I came, my mother-in-law brought me, and once I got here, you're not getting rid of me. I'm sorry, I love it.
Nor would we want to.
So here we go. I was wondering if I could hear some cradles. Why are you still here?
Because it's home.
Okay.
It's all I've ever known, and it's generational in my family, and it's just home. I was born and raised in New Orleans, and we moved here in 1975. The first thing I did was join this church. So.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And that's one of the phrases that we use all the time is that folks are looking for a spiritual home, right? And if we can provide that as the Episcopal Church, that's great. All right, this is going to be the last one. We're wrapping up.
Well, I'm an Episcopalian primarily because of a number of the people in this room. Okay. I come from a conservative evangelical background. I was, educated in a conservative evangelical seminary. And because I'm gay, I left that Southern Baptist denomination behind me, and I didn't step in church for 20 years. And when I heard that Father Jim was coming here, I said, well, obviously the people that attend this church have had a change of heart, or something is moving in this church for that to occur. And so Joel and I started coming here, and like a lot of new people who've been hurt by the church, we were wary, and we stood back and we observed and saw what was going on, and realized rather quickly that a lot of you were very authentic and loving, and you welcomed us. And so I'm not Episcopalian because of theology or doctrine, although that is important. I'm Episcopalian because of you, and I appreciate you. And I also appreciate the fact that coming from a conservative evangelical background, where a lot of times I would hear, the Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it. You allow for mystery. And you don't understand, you may not understand everything, you don't know everything, and you admit that. And there is a lot of mystery. There's a lot of mystery to God, there's a lot of mystery to life. And so I thank you, and I appreciate you.
What a beautiful way to wrap our time up together. I'm also so grateful for you guys, for your witness in this part of our diocese, in this part of our world. Grateful again for Father Jim inviting me to be with you for these weeks. Thank you so much. Episcopalians, we don't check our brains at the door. I love that, right? That's good. I have one big favor to ask of you. I'm going to pray, and then the master of my order has asked me to do something. I hope you'll indulge me. We're just going to take a picture together. Is that okay? Before we go, as this class wraps up, the Lord be with you. We want to thank you for your church. We want to thank you for each and every one here, for the members of your mystical body. May we be those who are concerned about creation, concerned about loving our neighbor as ourselves, concerned about, in word and in speech and in action, proclaiming the love of Christ to a broken and healing world. Thank you for the vocation that you've given to all of us, whether we are ordained or religious or a ministry of the baptized, to be light and salt on the earth. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Thank you. Can I ask everybody to kind of come toward that door, and then we're just going to do a little quick picture together, and then you're dismissed. Thank you all for coming.
I don't know.